I am Rakhi Bose, Assistant Editor with Outlook, and I bring to you excerpts from our latest issue, Women of the World Unite. In words of her own, Vinita Mokhil writes how Indian women writers have bravely chosen to tell us the tales that were suppressed or silenced by the dominant narrative. Be wife, they said, be embroiderer, be cook, be a quarreller with servants, fit in, oh, belong, cried the categorizers. An introduction by Kamala Das. Many Indian women writers have defined the limits set by the categorizers over the years, exploring the inner worlds of women, giving a voice to the marginalized, bravely choosing to tell the tales that were suppressed or silenced by the dominant narrative. Their fiction and poetry give readers a chance to see women as complex, full-blooded individuals, not just shadowy creatures who suffer silently in a man's world. More nuanced than reportage, far more emphatic than history's pages. Their work traces the trajectory of women's experiences, their lived realities. If not for their writing, many age-old silences would still be stifling Indian women. If not for their writing, a host of uncomfortable truths buried under the veneer of propriety would still be festering in the dark. Women were writing at all times, in all places, but their work was often not published, says Urvashi Butalia, writer and publisher. Sometimes they hid it, and on occasion, when it did get published, they had to face so much opposition. Some of the early works include the Therigatha poems by Buddhist nuns, Stri Purush Tulana, Tarabai Shinde's searing critique of patriarchy, Savitri Phule's writings and poems, and Telugu poet Muthu Palani's wonderful book Radhika's Santuvanam on female desire. In more contemporary times, Kamala Das wrote about transgressive women, devastated women. She placed the power imbalance in man-woman relationships under the scanner, laying bare the hypocrisies, the ingrained advantages men enjoy in a gendered world. In her short story, The Sea Lounge, a man who tells his sweetheart that he cannot marry her expects a public meltdown, or at least a river of tears. The woman, cool as the blue sea lapping at the lounge, surprises him with a response. This story, wry, witty, and woven as delicately as a gossamer web, smashes stereotypes with the force of a sledgehammer. In another story, A Doll for the Child Prostitute, Das reveals the brutality of sexual exploitation, voicing the agony of 13-year-old Rukmani, who is dumped at a brothel by her mother, a former prostitute. In Mahashweta Devi's story Draupadi, a rebellious Santhal woman who is violated by army officers, refuses to be the victim. No reader will forget the scene in which a defiant Draupadi walks toward her attackers, stark naked, looking them in the eye. Her courage leaves the men terribly afraid, and Mahashweta's words destabilize the patriarchy's notions about women's bodies, honor, and agency. While Mahashweta Devi spoke of the subaltern, Ashapurna Devi shone the spotlight on middle-class Bengali women in her fiction. Lives mostly confined to the home, the contours of their existence tailored to fit the needs of men. Ashapurna's characters grappled with sexism at every step. Her trilogy of novels, Pratham Pratishruti, Shubarnalata, and Bokul Katha, most memorably chronicles women's journeys towards independence. Interestingly, as a child, Ashapurna Devi was denied a formal education by her conservative grandmother. The little girl learned the Bengali alphabet by listening in on her brother's tutoring sessions, which were held at the family home. So much of women's writing grows from the personal, the emotional core of our lives, says Butalia, and yet it is deeply political in the way only personal stories can be. This is really what sets it apart from the mass of writings by men which have always dominated the literary space. To read the full story and other stories from this issue, log on to www.outlook.com.